My wife and I just returned from a 3-week long vacation in Sicily. We ate, we drank, we saw the sights. It was fantastic. So, guess what we're talking about on today's show? That's right, pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass, maybe cue up The Godfather in the other room, because it's time for us to be talking about the wines of Sicily. Hi there, everybody. My name's Mike LaPlante, and I'm the average wine enthusiast. Today, we're going to be talking about wine from that island in the middle of the Mediterranean known as Sicily. It is the largest island in the Mediterranean, and of course, it belongs to Italy. But Sicily doesn't produce the same kinds of wine that you may be familiar with that are from Italy. You know, there's Piedmont, Lombardy, Barolo, Tuscany, all those big red wines. Those don't exist in Sicily for the most part. Having said that, Sicily does produce mostly good wine. We just recently came back from a trip from Sicily, which is the reason I am doing this show today, because my wife and I went on a little 3-week vacation to Sicily, traveled all around the island, saw the sights, drank the wine, ate the food. It was fantastic. So, like I was saying, most of the wine that we came across was actually quite good. I can't remember a wine that I drank that I said, bleh. So, there's that. So, what can you expect from Sicilian wine? Or are you even afraid to pick up a bottle of Sicilian wine if you saw it in the liquor store or the wine store or wherever you pick up your wine? For the most part, I'm going to say that if you see a Sicilian wine on your shelf, odds are high that it's not very expensive. That is one thing I noticed about Sicilian wine, that it's relatively affordable, I have to admit, for the quality you get. So you get a good QPR, quality price ratio is good for Sicilian wines, I have to admit. And they've been doing wine there for thousands of years. Crazy. You can still see lots of antiquities on the island of Sicily that date back to before Christ. So, and as you know, they were drinking wine when Christ was around. So, what can I tell you about Sicilian wines and what to look for when you're shopping for a Sicilian wine in your local wine store? Well, the grapes that I found to be ubiquitous everywhere are, there's the big one is Nero d'Avola, which is a red grape that produces a wine that is, what's the best way to describe it? It's got the fruity, cherry, licorice, vanilla flavor profile. However, you don't usually get it isn't full of body. The texture is medium, and the finishes are, in some cases, non-existent. But it's a good tasting wine. The next grape that I guess I could talk about in terms of red wine grapes is Nerolo Mescalese, which is a grape that grows pretty much exclusively near Mount Etna, or I should say it grows right on Mount Etna, actually. And these grapes are pretty much exclusive to that area, whereas the Nero d'Avola grapes, they grow almost all over the island. Where Nero d'Avola it calls home is in the lower right section of the island, near Noto and Avola, and in the city of Syracuse, or as they call it there, Siracusa. So that's where you find the majority of the Nero d'Avola grapes, and those are the pretty good ones too, because they do grow them on the other side of the island, the west side, and those are usually used to blend with other grapes to produce other wines. So there's Nero d'Avola, there is Nerolo Mescalese, but another big red wine there is a wine called Frappato. or as they like to refer to as porch pounders, because it is a very light drinking wine. Usually doesn't have very much alcohol by volume, usually around 12%, sometimes even 11.5. I saw one down there. But it is pleasant to drink, absolutely. You would like to chill it to, somewhere uh, around 60 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that is below that, to make it enjoyable. So there's that wine that is available that they grow plenty of there as well. On the other side of the island, besides Nero d'Avola, they grow lots of white grapes there. The number one grape that I found is a grape called Grillo. So it's Grllo. We might pronounce it Grillo, but it's not Grillo. Doesn't rhyme with Brillo. It's Grillo. And the two L's don't form a Y either, which is what I want to do when I'm in Italy. But Grillo is a white grape that I found to be very minerally, some salinity to it, but it's also that does pack some acidity, because the nights, I suspect, on the west side of the island are cooler, and that's what you need to produce the acid that you find in Grillo. So if you see a bottle of Grillo, I would recommend to give it a try for sure. Now, they do grow other red grape varietals there. You can find some Cabernet Sauvignons, Merlots, and definitely some Syrahs. But they don't take on the same characteristics as those same grape varieties in other countries. And they tend to, same as the Nero d'Avola, the body isn't there, the texture isn't what you would expect out of these grape varietals. There was another white wine, Cadarato, Trebbiano, and Grecianico, and Zibibio. Zibibio, that's a fun one to pronounce, isn't it? I suspect that might be a Greek wine that got transplanted over to Sicily at some point, but I'm not sure. I didn't go into the history of Zibibio. But those are great white wine grapes that are grown a lot in Sicily. Now, if you ever heard of a Marsala wine, that is made with Grillo grapes and a couple other grapes as well. And of course, they add some kind of spirit in there, usually brandy. And it's a relatively popular wine there, and that area is known for that as well. They also have salt flats there, which I had never seen before, which is quite interesting how they get the sea salt out of the water right off the coast there in Marsala. Interesting stuff indeed. So we landed in Catania, which is over on the right-hand side, made our way down the bottom of the island, going towards the west, made it over to Marsala, stayed in Palermo, the area, for a while, and then we headed over to Mount Etna, which is really what I call the crown jewel of the whole Sicilian wine industry, because of course it's a volcano. In fact, it's an active volcano, and while we were there, Mount Etna was acting up. It was crazy to see. Like right from our Airbnb where we were staying, we could go out on our little deck there, and you could just look at the volcano, and you can see the volcanic lava spewing up. It was really well, I've never seen a live volcano before, so it was really interesting. But like I said, volcanic soil, of course, we know is what grapes is one of the things that grapes really like to see in the ground. And of course, that's because it doesn't hold much water. It makes it really hard to get the nutrients it needs. And of course, the harder a grapevine has to work, usually the better the grape is. But you need the whole terroir package, of course. And the terroir up there, of course, you're up on a mountain, so you're going to get those cool temperatures at night, so you can get that acidity that you need in your Nerolo Mescaleses. And they make that makes for a really good grape growing environment for sure. So the best wine that I had while I was there was a wine from the Etna area, and it was a blend of Nerolo Mescalese, which can be like a light colored wine. If you, it almost looks like a Pinot Noir, and they blend that with a grape called Nerolo Cappuccio. I know these names are all Italian and foreign, that's for sure. But once you realize that these two grapes together, they're like it's like a nice Bordeaux blend that's big and beautiful and tastes awesome. So those two grapes growing in on Mount Etna make for fantastic wine. We visited two wineries while we were in the Mount Etna area. One was Patria Vineyards or Patria Winery, I forget exactly what it was called, but they have a very nice portfolio of wine, and we sat down for a tasting there, and we had a food pairing, usually pasta or and antipasti, some cold cuts, olives, bread, and all that kind of stuff, along with a pasta. I don't remember getting a dessert there. And then our next tasting up there was at Gambino Winery, which has a reputation for making fantastic wines. Beautiful place, beautiful location, overlooking all these vineyards, and of course you're on a mountain, you're looking off to the edge of the island, and seeing the Mediterranean Sea is just quite beautiful up there. And the wines they make there are also awesome. And we had the same kind of food pairing type thing. So we were, getting sausages and cheeses and olives and all that kind of stuff to go with the wines they were serving there. Now, when you go for wine tastings there, they like to do it to the max, I guess is a good way to say it. Just showing up and sitting down at a wine bar saying you want a tasting, that doesn't usually go well because they're kind of waiting for you, especially if you're an English speaking person who wants to do that. They need an English speaking person there. As you can tell, I'm having a little problem with my English, to greet you there and tell you about the wines in a way that's easily communicated. So you should book. If you go to Sicily, book your wine tastings. Having said that, we were staying at an Airbnb near Marsala, and the woman who owned the place where we were staying at, we asked her what kind of wine she liked, and she said Donna Fugata. I had never heard of Donna Fugata up until the time I got to Sicily, so we decided that we didn't want to book a tasting at Donna Fugata because we weren't going to be in town long enough, and you got to give them a couple days notice before they'll be willing to accept you. Well, when we get there, it's this huge complex. It kind of reminds me of going to like Jackson Triggs or Inniskillen or someplace like that. Definitely not a mom and pop organization. Very corporate, let's just put it that way. And then once I realized I can actually get Donna Fugata here in my local LCBO, I understand why, because they're producing lots of wine and lots of good wine and expensive wine. They have I don't even know the name, Dolce and Gabbani. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure. So they have packaged wine in the special Dolce Gabbani get up. It's to me that's all ridiculous. So that's where we bought the most expensive wine, was at Donna Fugata. But in that case, we just walked in. We just walked into the reception area and told them we wanted to buy some wine, and they offered to pour us some wine, and we did it in a very informal setting. They had a couple tables there, and they pulled some glasses out, and there was 5 of us, and they just poured us some wine, which was very nice of them, I have to admit. And of course, we bought some wine. Like I said, the most expensive wine we bought was there. Was it the best wine we had while we were there? No, because like I said before, the best wine is from the Mount Etna area, for sure. But having said that, Donna Fugata does get grapes from the Mount Etna area, and they do have the red blend that comes from Mount Etna, the one that I just mentioned, Nerolo Mescalese and the Nerolo Cappuccio. That is called Etna Rosso. And of course, the white wine that comes from Mount Etna is Etna Bianco. So Donna Fugata, just based on their size, they source grapes from the whole island, and they do sell probably more than one Etna Rosso, which kind of makes me think of another aspect of Sicilian wine that I found very interesting is the fact that, I know how a lot of winemakers differ in their winemaking techniques, their barrel programs, and their aging techniques. That here in Canada, I'm aware of how different wineries approach their winemaking. There's a passamento, and there's all kinds of different ways people make their wine. And the same is true in Sicily as well. I find that the winemaking processes try to make the best of the grape and try to make up for maybe some of the qualities that are lacking in some of the grapes, whether it's the way they blend, the way they ferment, what they ferment in, and the use of oak barrels or not, and all that kind of stuff. I've really found that to be interesting, how they also are, doing whatever they can to make the best wine with the grapes they are given. I remember we went to COS was another winery that we went to, which is in the Vittoria wine region of Sicily. And Vittoria is the only DOCG wine region in Sicily. Any wine region in Italy, automatically, if you're certified to be a wine region, you get the DOC stamp of approval. So you can call yourself a DOC. And you see that on all wine bottles, the DOC that they belong to. But in Vittoria, they get the DOCG because they hold up that standard when they make their wines. There's different growing techniques, winemaking techniques, alcohol by volume, which has held them back from consistently being a DOCG. So I think in 2018 the grapes that they harvested were unable to produce wine that was 13% alcohol by volume. So for that year they lost their DOCG accreditation. But if the next year they were able to make it, so they automatically get their DOCG accreditation back, which is they're kind of like right on the border as far as the climate they need down there to produce the grapes that can hold up to that standard. So what was I going to say about COS? I forget now. But it was a nice winery. What I have to say though is that typically in the south of Sicily, it's relatively dry and arid, and the air currents that come off the sea down there aren't as cool as the air currents that come off the sea in the north. So that's what you need to cool the grapes down at night, is the cool sea breeze to get the acidity that you need to make full-bodied wine with nice long finishes and beautiful textures and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that's going to wrap up what I can tell you about Sicily and the wines that they produce there. If you go to your local wine store to pick some up, I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised by the price of the wine. Like I said, it has a good quality price ratio. Don't let the price scare you away. I know that when we were in Sicily, I often found wines that were €5 to €8, which that's, I don't know, about $9 to $13 Canadian for a pretty good bottle of wine. So when you go to your local wine store, don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by the price on the low end. I just went recently to see what kind of Sicilian wines I could find, and I found some of this Nere, which is a Nero d'Avola, and it was very reasonably priced. I did also find some Etna Rosso. This is a Volca, which I bought before we left, just because I wanted to taste some Sicilian wine before we left, and I did buy this bottle, and I did see this bottle in Sicily when I was there, in various liquor store, wine stores, or wherever they sell. They sell in grocery stores there too. And this is an Etna Rosso that was quite reasonably priced, I have to admit. And then the most expensive bottle of the bunch is the Flora Mundi by Donna Fugata, which this is a red with ample bouquet and fragrant notes of red fruits and spices, soft and enveloping, perfect by the glass with tasty first courses and grilled meats. Best served slightly chilled at 15 to 16 degrees Celsius or 61 to 64 Fahrenheit, which I think that's a good rule of thumb for most red wines. But it doesn't tell me what grapes are in the Flora Mundi, but it came from the Sassuolo di Vittoria DOCG, so it was nowhere near Donna Fugata's winery. They sourced this from the Vittoria DOCG, the wine region down there, which makes me think odds are high. It is a Nero d'Avola and could have some Frappato in here. I'm not sure. I'm going to look into it, though, that's for sure, because they did not have this wine available to us at the winery. So, and this was the most expensive, and it was $23 for that bottle of wine. So it'll be interesting to see how the Etna Rosso compares to the Donna Fugata from the DOCG of Vittoria. Anyway, I guess that's going to do it for this show. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate it. If you know anybody who is in the same boat as you, you're digging wine so much that you're watching you're watching the YouTubes. If you know somebody who digs wine as much as you and watches wine videos on YouTube, let them know about the Average Wine Enthusiast. I'd really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the Big Organ Trio for letting me use their music on the show. Until next time, everybody, my name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salud!